By the way, this isn't my speech. It's actually the POFMA bill. One of the reasons I printed it out, maybe there'll be some things we'll quote in the Q&A, but it's also here if any of you would like to look at it, because I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of people, and very few of them actually downloaded it and read it. So I think when we're going to comment on these things, it is useful that we actually take the time to have a look at them. So I do hope some people do take the time to have a look at them. So the POFMA Act. Now, there is a real problem with fake news. I mean, we all know this. It's very difficult to define. It's very difficult to deal with in a legal basis. At least that's my opinion, and that seems to be the opinion around the world. What it all stems from is something that I said in my speech the other day, and that's just a trust deficit. There's a trust deficit around the world between the people and the government. And actually, that's also one of the issues. Why are they divided? Why is it the people and the government? Because the people also make up the government. So what's different about the people inside the government than the people outside the government? Except that for some of them, they've been so long in those places that they now view themselves as different. And as we saw with this law, they now seem to think not only are they politicians, but they're also qualified judges, because they're taking on the role of judges in what they've written inside this law. So I think one of the things we should all do is to start remembering that they're just people, right? We're all human beings. Whatever role we have, at the base level, we're a human being. And now, when we talk about Singapore, like many countries, we are technically a democracy. We have a vote. But that is only one of the criteria of what makes up a democracy. Now, there are different types of democracies, and there's a lot of scholars who've researched and studied what is democracy, and there are different flavours. You know, you have the Western one, which is very much focused on the individual and the individual's rights. You have our Asian styles of democracy, which are more focused on the community and laws and ways of working that put the group above the individual. Each one is different. There's nothing wrong or right. It depends on your background. But they all have some certain core things when they really are a democracy. One of which is that they have the vote, the free and fair election. One of which is that they have a right of freedom of speech and association, so that they can discuss whatever requires to be discussed. And the third one is that there is a rule of law, and it's evenly applied to everyone, including the members of the government. And where those are most adhered to, you have more democracy. What they've also found in the studies is that nowhere in the world is there a 100% perfect democracy. It's not possible, because humans get involved. But what you do have is you have some systems that are better than others, and there is less room for abuse in those systems for non-democratic practices. So when we start looking at the POFMA Act in particular, you can see that this one piece of legislation is damaging all three of those. We know about the infamous Clause 61, the exemption from the law, and the minister can decide. So immediately they're putting themselves above the law. So the rule of law is not being evenly applied to everyone. We've heard, you know, the fear factor and the fear mongering and all the other stuff. When it even just being in existence, before it's even used, it's already going to change freedom of speech. People are going to be influenced by it. They're going to self-censor. And if they start using it, depending on how they use it, that may get even worse. And as we heard in the talks, you had Vikram Nair saying, oh, there's going to be hundreds of applications during the elections. So he pretty much let slip there, and the Prime Minister has said it at a few different times, that this is very much to be used during election time. So that's going to affect elections. So you have one piece of legislation that is attacking all the three core tenets of a democracy, of any kind of democracy. Now, there are antidotes to it, because this is now law, and There are systems in the world that on their surface they're not democratic, but the way they run it, it ends up with a democratic result. So regardless of what the actual law is, it comes down to the people at every level. So at one level, it's us as the citizens. How active and aware are we going to be? Are we just going to sit back and let them do what they want with it? So the more we get engaged, and we also have our courage, and we speak, and we do all of those things, and we do it in cleverly, not in scream, yell, whatever, but be mindful that this exists now. So think a little bit before you keep talking, but don't stop talking. So an aware and active citizenry is one of those antidotes. The second part of it is the officials within the system. And obviously I don't know if any of them are here in the room. I don't think so. Maybe there is one and he's pretending to be ordinary, who knows. But the officials in the system, whatever the rules are, if you've got the right morals inside you, if you understand what are the right ethical practices, you may or may not go along with whatever you're asked to do if it's not appropriate, if it's not democratic. So as well as the citizens being aware, you also have to think about, we need the officials to be aware. Now, of course, for some of you, that may be your friends, that may be your family members. So you can make your friends and family members who work within the government service aware that I'm watching you, uncle, father, brother, whatever. Are you acting democratically for Singapore? Regardless of what the rules and laws are, it's up to you to decide, are you going to do it or not? And then the third component, of course, is the law writers, so our political elite class. And are they writing laws that are for promoting democracy or taking it away? Of course, in this one, it looks like taking it away. In fact, we even had the law minister himself saying he doesn't know how any future government might use this. But of course, he won't misuse it. Okay, fine. But if you're writing a law that you know is open to misuse, is that responsible? Are you a responsible lawmaker putting in practice a law that someone in the future could misuse? So maybe our lawmakers can go back and start saying, maybe we need to revise some of this or not. Okay. So when we talk about what do we do going forward, is a summary of my little introduction. We ourselves, we have to be aware and awake. We have to not stop speaking, but we speak with caution, but we don't stop speaking. We also, as I mentioned just now, if you have relatives, friends, whatever, involved in implementing laws like this, you have to talk to them to make sure they're doing those things right as well. And obviously influence the lawmakers to do something different. Now, one of the few ways we've got, and we were told so many times in Parliament, is the vote. Well, if 96% of the people are unhappy, then I hope 96% of the people at the next election go, right, we're unhappy, we're not voting for you now. Right? That's one of the things that you need to start to do. Before I wrap up though, I did want to call out a couple of points here that a lot of people missed on the law, and I'm only going to pull up the last page. And actually the law is the first half of it, and then the second half of it is a bit of explanations. But we heard about clause 61, which was the we're exempting. There are two other clauses that are popped in right at the end, clause 60 and clause 62. So clause 60, when you have laws that have a certain level of prison sentence or fine attached, they have to be heard in the High Court. That's in our penal code of conduct. They're very serious, so you're looking at more than 10 years in prison, very big fines, all of this, especially when they're combined. The district courts and the magistrates' courts here lower class is a problem. So the lawyers there and the judges, whatever, they're used to a different type of law that they administer. Within POFMA, they specifically allow, even though they have these very long prison sentences and fines or whatever, they allow POFMA claims to be prosecuted in the district courts and the magistrates' courts. I'm wondering why. Maybe the volume, because Vikram there was saying there's going to be hundreds during the election. So maybe they need the district courts because they're going to have hundreds of these things going on. Who knows? But I think the law profession maybe should have a look at this and wonder why are they allowing this to be put there, especially if it has such severe penalties. For everything else, it has to go to the High Court because you want the more experienced judges, and yet now they're saying it can be any of our courts can do it. So that's something to think about. Within that same clause 60, they also enable a court to try a person if they're outside of Singapore as though they were inside of Singapore and for anywhere in the world. And it specifically says extraterritorial application under the bill. So basically they're writing it in the way that they want to become the world's policeman for the internet with respect to Singapore. Of course, for individuals it's going to be less impactful, but for corporations, because there's a lot of stuff in here attacking corporations as well if they don't do what they want, that's maybe going to impact technology companies that come into the country or work in the country. It may, we have academic institutions here, universities that run here. The first time someone gets hit with that, maybe we're going to lose half of our foreign universities. Who knows? So there are things here we need to think about. Is this right that they're making it extra territorial? And then the last one, clause 62, a regulation-making power. And I'm just going to flip to it to read the exact words. The minister may make regulations necessary or convenient to be prescribed for carrying out or giving effect to this act. So although this is the law, the minister, apart from judging what's right and wrong, beyond this law, can just randomly make up regulations on this. So he could technically, the week before the election, say anyone who's standing in the election can't use social media for the next 18 days to make sure we have no fake news during this election, or words to that effect. Because of regulation, he could make it up. He could put, what could we do about it? So it's not only open-ended, it also gives open-ended authority to, in fact, almost write your own laws as and when you need them. So there are lots of things in here that we need to be wary of. Now, of course, like I said earlier, a democratic system, it depends on the people. So it also depends on the politicians and the people who are actually going to use this law, how free they think their hand is to use it or abuse it. And really that's going to come down to us making it very clear to them that there is a very high political price to pay if they misuse it. And if they do, then we do what we can to replace them with people that have more respect to democracy and respect for the Singapore citizens.